Yo book nerds, I finally finished reading Essential Tales and Poems by Edgar Allan Poe. I have read Edgar Allan Poe before. Like, I've read some of the poems and the short stories that are in here, but I had definitely had not read this much of his works. So this was a deep dive and I really enjoyed it. It took me a little bit longer than planned to get through this book, but that's because of life and not because I wasn't enjoying myself. Like, I really was enjoying myself. As to be expected from the master of the macabre, Poe's works across the board are dark. They deal with death. Many stories deal with reincarnation, with ghosts rising from the dead, with people being buried alive. So many of the stories take place in fall. Like, the fall Halloween vibes were so strong with this. Like, I just read this at the perfect time because I started this back in October. So like, I was fully invested in the spooky, creepy, dark vibes. If you know anything about Poe's background, he lost his mother, he lost his foster mother, and he lost his wife, all while he was very young. So the fact that he is kind of obsessed with death is not surprising. I'm not going to talk about every single poem and story in here, but I will give you a list of my favorites. I loved The Fall of the House of Usher. That was a reread for me. I think I read that in like 9th grade. I don't know. It was sometime in high school, I think. And it had been a long time, but I really enjoyed the reread. I enjoyed The Mask of the Red Death. I loved The Telltale Heart. That was also a reread. I've read that a couple times. I enjoyed The Black Cat. The cat in that is named Pluto, which is the Roman god of the underworld. And I've read a lot of Greek and Roman mythology this year, so it was just very fitting with the themes that I've been reading about this year. I, of course, loved The Raven. I've read that many times, so that was a reread. And then I really enjoyed Annabelle Lee and Dreamland. I was a little disappointed that his poem, it's a sonnet to science, was not included in this collection. I read that poem for the first time last winter, and I really liked it. And I had gotten this book like 4 years ago now. Taylor bought it for me on our first date, and I have just finally now read it. But I didn't know I would like that poem and that it wasn't in here. So I was a little disappointed to see that that poem was not included. But other than that, like, I really enjoyed this entire collection. Of the short stories, The Telltale Heart is forever my favorite. Like, that seems so cliche to say, but I just get like giddy when I sit down to read that one. Like, it's just perfect. I love The Telltale Heart. It is a madman who keeps telling you he's not mad. Like it's just unreliable narrator and crazy narrator. Like, just insane. I just love that story. It is so good. If you haven't read The Telltale Heart, what are you doing? You should. It is the perfect Halloween read. Of his poems, again, cliche, but The Raven is my favorite. Again, I get so giddy when I just sit down to read that poem. It's so good, and every time I read it, it just gets better and better, and I just can't recommend it enough. If you haven't read The Raven, again, what are you doing? Like, it is one of his most famous works for a reason. Like, it is so good. And the Baltimore Ravens named their team after the Raven poem. So, like, come on, guys. I'm not a football fan, but I'm just trying to get you to read The Raven if you haven't. So, read it. But, like, The Raven for real is just, it is so hauntingly beautiful. It is just perfect. Like, I can't even express in words because this poem is just so perfect. Like, I I just love how it builds and it gets creepier and creepier and creepier, and it just pulls at your heartstrings and you can feel the tension, and it's just wonderful. Masterpiece. It is a masterpiece of his, for sure. Besides the tales of the macabre in here, there are also short stories that are grouped together as tales of detection, and it's all about like detective stories and like solving mysteries, and those were really interesting. I'd never read any of those before, and they kind of reminded me of the movie Knives Out, if you've ever seen that movie. But it reminded me of that because like each story, like there was another layer and another layer and another layer, and it all made sense, but on the surface, like you would never have guessed the answer, but you have this like windy road to get to the answer to the mysteries, and they were really fun. Like they were just interesting, gruesome still, but fun. There are also some essays in here, which I also really enjoyed. The Imp of the Perverse essay that he did was very interesting. It was all about how we as humans have a tendency to do things because we're not supposed to do them. It's basically like, if you're a Christian, like it's an argument about sin and why we sin, like the draw to sin. Like, why do we have this tendency to do perverse things? Like we are told not to do something, so then we must do it because we were told not to. And it was just a very interesting read. And I think it's especially interesting because when Poe was writing, his writings were very taboo. So like people probably were telling him like, you shouldn't be writing these things. And that maybe made him want to write them more because he's not supposed to be writing these things. Like, I just found that really interesting. Then he had an essay called Diddling Considered as One of the Exact Sciences, and that had me rolling. Like, it was so humorous and so funny, and I don't know if he meant it to be that way, but it definitely was. And I just, like, if you want a good laugh, go read that essay because it is very amusing. Very amusing. I would be sitting on the couch reading it and giggling to myself, and Taylor would be sitting next to me like, what is going on? And I would just have to tell him, like, plus just like the word diddling with the double meaning of what it means, like, just it adds a layer of humor to it for sure. Then there was an essay called The Philosophy of Composition, which was basically Poe explaining how he wrote The Raven. And I mean, obviously don't know if this is truly how it happened, but if it is, like, his writing process for it was just fascinating. As a writer myself, as someone who teaches writing too, like, just seeing inside the mind of a great American writer and someone who's been long gone, like, you're getting a peek inside his mind, and he's been dead for how many years? Like, over 100 years, almost 200 years. Like, getting that peek inside of the mind of a writer and seeing his process for writing The Raven was just fascinating to me. So cool. It's not too often you get to hear from a great writer on their craft, like as like a classic writer on their craft. So it was a treat. I do want to comment on Poe's only novel that he ever wrote that is included in here. It's called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. This novel, I have mixed feelings about this novel. I definitely think that Poe's strength lies in short stories and poetry. Like, I see why he didn't write more novels. Like, this was tough for him, I think, but I still got enjoyment out of it. The beginning was very good. The beginning had me hooked. It was a sea story. You're following this group of sailors on a whale ship. And so, like, I love nautical adventures. And it had me hooked there. It deals with mutiny. It deals with shipwreck and starvation. And It was gruesome, but it had me hooked and I was interested. And then the book kind of takes a turn and it goes off on some side story. Like, it just kind of lost its way. Like, halfway through, it just kind of lost its way. And I was not invested anymore, and I didn't understand where the story was going, and it just ended abruptly, and I did not like the ending. So take that with a grain of salt, like, take that as what you will. I don't know how to feel about his novel because the beginning was very, very good. So spoiler alert, because I can't talk more without saying more about the novel, but basically, like, Arthur Gordon Pym, his ship, like, they go through a mutiny and then the ship gets destroyed and they're on this little slab of it floating out in the middle of nowhere, him and a couple sailors that survive, and they're starving. And like, that whole part of the story was very interesting, very, very fascinating, had me hooked, very gruesome. But then they're finally rescued, and then they go on some voyage to Antarctica, and then like they meet these savages down there, and that was kind of interesting but also just really weird. And then after that they continue going further into Antarctica, and then like there's some like mystical being, and then the book just ends. And it was like, huh? Like, what? And I have a theory because I looked up what time of his life Poe wrote this, and Poe was writing this like when voyagers were trying to explore Antarctica, and at first they were kind of unsuccessful, and then they started having a little bit more success exploring. And I think that maybe when Poe started writing this story, he was very interested in Antarctica, and like maybe he was interested in creating some kind of like myth surrounding Antarctica, and then these real life expeditions were maybe discovering things that were like messing with his plot because they weren't true, things weren't matching up. And I think maybe he just gave up. Like, maybe he just said, fine, I'm not rewriting it, it's done, and boom. I don't know. That's my theory, but I don't know. I just didn't like the ending. It just really left you on a cliffhanger, not a good kind of a cliffhanger. Like, it just was like, what happened? I don't get it. He never makes it back to his family. They don't know what happened to him. Did he die? Like, what? There was so many things that just didn't connect. I wasn't satisfied with the end of the novel. But the beginning was really good. Anyway, I will end with, because I don't want to end on a kind of a negative note, I'm going to end with some quotes from throughout this whole collection that I really enjoyed. So this quote comes from The Premature Burial. That the ghastly extremes of agony are endured by man the unit, and never by man the mass. For this let us thank a merciful God. I just found that quote interesting. Like, we experience such deep personal woes. Like, yes, there are huge calamities that affect groups of people, but thank God we don't all feel each other's woes so deeply, because we'd all be suffering all the time then. Like, at least we really just have to focus on our own woes, to be honest. Like we can feel for other people, but thank God the ghastly extremes of agony are endured by man the unit, and never by man the mass. Let us thank a merciful God. Like, it's just an interesting quote to me. Then also from The Premature Burial, basically what you need to know is that a man was buried alive, and he was rescued. And then it says, he was forthwith conveyed to the nearest hospital, and there pronounced to be still living, although in an asphytic condition. Not sure if I said that word correctly, but I just think that's hilarious. You were buried alive. Obviously you're alive. And they take you to the hospital to pronounce you still living. Like, it just sounds so weird, so backwards, so funny. Obviously being buried alive would not be funny, but having to go to the hospital and be pronounced living is just ironic. I feel like Poe does a good job of sprinkling in humor into some of his writing so that it's not too dark. It's like dark humor. It really is. It's dark humor. Then in The Mystery of Marie Roget, there's this line which says, "We should bear in mind that, in general, it is the object of our newspapers rather to create a sensation, to make a point, than to further the cause of truth." That is so true today. Like, you gotta be so careful with what you hear in the news. Like, it seems like every news station, they have their own agenda. They want to create some kind of response, and they don't always fact check things, and it's really sad. And they really don't care about truth anymore. Like, I wish they did. I wish they could just report go out and report the actual truth of things, but they always try to spin things, it seems like. And I'm not talking just any newspaper or any like news station. Like, it seems like they're all this way. Like, every single one. Like, I can't find one that just reports what happened without giving their own opinions on it. This next quote is still from that same story, The Mystery of Marie Roget. The quote is, "It is not that the deity," meaning God, "cannot modify his laws, but that we insult him in imagining a possible necessity for modification. In their origin, these laws were fashioned to embrace all contingencies which could lie in the future. With God, all is now." Now, I think that is something that we as humans, like, I'm a Christian, so I believe in God. And like, I think that is something that is so hard for us to wrap our heads around, is that God is perfect and we are not. God knows what we need, and he knows what's good for us, and he's planned everything out. Like, the laws were fashioned to embrace all contingencies. Like, we insult him by imagining a possible necessity for modification. Like we think we know best, and we don't. As a Christian, that's something that's so hard to overcome in our own minds. All right, this next quote is from The Purloined Letter. There's these two men, G and Dupin. Don't know if I'm saying that name correctly either, but they're having a conversation, and one calls somebody else a fool, and G responds saying, "Not altogether a fool," said G, "but then he's a poet, which I take to be only one remove from a fool," which I find hilarious because Poe himself, who wrote this, is a poet. So he just called himself a fool. The irony, like, he's cracking jokes at himself. Like, I think that's hilarious. I love it. I love that little, like, Easter egg in there. Then this last quote I want to share is from The Imp of the Perverse, and it says, "There lives no man who at some period has not been tormented, for example, by an earnest desire to tantalize a listener by circumlocution." And this line comes after Poe just like rambled on for forever and didn't get to his point. And it's just so funny. Like, he just said every man wants to torment someone by talking a lot and unnecessarily, and he just did that. Like, he's playing with the reader. Like, he's torturing you. He's being a pain in the butt. Like, he's pranking us, and I love it. It's so funny. It's like, come on, get to your point. And then he says that, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you did that on purpose because you wanted to mess with me. Like, what the heck? I'm getting pranked by a guy that lived in the 1800s. Like, this is so funny. And I just thoroughly enjoyed this collection, and I thoroughly enjoy Edgar Allan Poe. And if you haven't read him, I think you should. So overall, I highly recommend all of his works. Even the ones I didn't quite enjoy, like, all the way through, I still enjoyed them enough to say, like, give them a try. But overall, like, his short stories and his poems are just fantastic. His essays are entertaining. His novel is okay, but take that with a grain of salt. If you've read any of these works or any of the ones in here that I haven't mentioned, like, I still would love to talk to you in the comments. We can chat about anything in here. That's all I have for you guys today. Hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for talking books with me.